Hello, my name is Simon Double, and welcome to Inside the Rails, a monthly podcast for horse racing enthusiasts everywhere. And as ever, I'm joined by my co-host Phil Boyle from BG Racing. Phil, you must be pretty pleased we're moving into the jump season proper.
Yeah, hi Simon. I'm thrilled with that. We're recording this a couple of days after the first Cheltenham meeting of the new jump season, and I was delighted to get down there this weekend. Definitely back in my comfort zone now.
Did you back any winners at Cheltenham?
Only one. My trainer Neil Mulholland had a runner there. Which
I saw that. It was quite half decent price, wasn't it? I think
it certainly was. Yeah. It paid for the rest of my day.
Excellent. Well, listen, we're not quite done on the flat yet. Yes, we've crowned William Buick as champion jockey, so a big well done to him and his agent, Tony Hind, who was one of our guests, about a year ago now. But there's also the Breeders' Cup, the first weekend of November, and we have, as our guest today, our first champion jockey, Paul Hanagan, in fact, a former dual champion jockey, and he'll be talking to us from Bahrain, where he's riding this winter.
Yeah, indeed. I'm looking forward to chatting with Paul, and I am actually looking forward to the Breeders' Cup, despite my slight preference for the jumps over the flat. So, I will be watching that. Now, we usually start by reviewing our runners, and in recent podcasts, we've been able to chat about a winner. Well, I'm delighted that our winning streak has continued, and it's you that's celebrating the win again this time. So, Dancing in the Woods was coming home in front. Tell me all about it.
Yes, indeed. And do you know what? I missed it. I wasn't there because I was at Tattersall's sales trying to buy horses. We'll talk about that a bit later. But yeah, it was Woody, as he's known, Dancing in the Woods, Woody. His first ever run on the all-weather at Kempton, over 7 furlongs. I've been banging on about the fact that I think he needed to go back up to 7 furlongs. And a 5-year-old, he was given a great ride by Frederick Larson. It was an apprentice race, so we had to have an apprentice on board. It was the horse's 4th career win. Look, he's been fantastic for the syndicate. He's won prize money in 20 of his 25 starts. What's that? 80% strike rate. And the only regret, as I say, was that I wasn't able to see the win. But the next best thing was that I was with Amy Murphy, the trainer, Lemos, her husband and assistant trainer, in the Tattersall's bar, watching the race. And then Amy bought a bottle of champagne and we celebrated. It was really lovely.
Yeah, I saw you at the sales, and you said that Twilight Bay was being sold when we spoke last month, but I noticed you gave her a bit of a swan song run in October.
Yes, well, she didn't exactly cover herself in glory. She's off to the sales this week. She ran at Wolverhampton. They did go a bit too quick, to be fair to the filly, and in fact she arrived back home with an incredibly high temperature, which fortunately subsided. Anyway, she's having another final swan song, a bit like Frank Sinatra. She runs at Newcastle tonight. She's a rank outsider, about 50-1. I'm not expecting too much. If she could get a place, that would be lovely. But she's been a sweet filly. She's had her problems, and we'll see how she fares at the sales later this week.
And good to hear that you'll be jumping in the Solario Racing helicopter straight after the recording session to get up there, no doubt.
I wish. Yes.
I saw Shot Distinction had a couple of runs as well. How did they go?
Yeah, not bad actually, Phil. He was a little bit disappointing at Kempton. We ran him over 1 mile 3 furlongs. And again, I think the jockeys went a little bit too quick. I think too much use was made of him. He did run pretty well 2 or 3 days ago up at Doncaster and was 6th in the mud. Going back to jockeys, look, we've talked about jockeys before, haven't we? And we've both agreed it's difficult for them when they're having to make split-second decisions. I've been thinking about this, and I think compared with other sports such as football, rugby, tennis, cricket, if you make a mistake or things don't go well, you've got longer to rectify it. So, if you take football, for example, if a team misses a penalty in the first half, you've got the second half. If you've got cricket, you get bowled out for, say, 90, you've got a second innings. There's time to make amends. With racing, if jockey makes a mistake or the horse misses the break, that's it. Curtains, finito. Connections, owners, trainers, they've got to wait until the next race. And then, of course, conditions are different. The competition is probably different. I think it is tough, and we'll probably talk to Paul Hanagan later on about that. What are your thoughts, Phil, on this before we come on to how the BG horses have been performing during the last month?
I guess like you, I don't really like to be critical of jockeys. They're the only person that knows what they were seeing and feeling when they made decisions in the middle of a race. You see it all the time, punters sort of talking through their pockets, as it were, when they've had
Yep.
selection that they've had a bad ride, in their opinion. But in my opinion, most of those occasions the jockey wasn't at fault anyway, and in almost all of the other occasions it was just a mistake. I can't think there'll be many people who haven't made a mistake at work, and maybe people should think about that before they start being too critical. But yeah, you mentioned the BG Racing horses. In terms of them, it was not so good for me this month. We only had one runner, and that was Dynamic Kate, who raced at Stratford. Things were actually looking like they were going to go really well. She was coming to challenge what looked like being a tired leader at the last hurdle, but unfortunately, because he was tired, he jumped across in front of her, and whether that put her off or not, I'll never know. But she took a pretty heavy fall, unfortunately. So thankfully, there was no obvious injury, but she's been pretty sore in the days after the race, and so she'll have a break now. She doesn't really enjoy the soft ground that prevails over the winter, so she'll have a rest, and hopefully we get to swap horses in terms of visiting the races, because Far Too Beautiful, who hasn't run for a while because she really wants soft ground, she's due to make her hurdles debut at Chepstow tomorrow, the day after we record this. So,
okay,
yeah, listeners will be able to check how she got on by the time this is released. So, looking forward to that. But changing the subject away from the racecourse, we've mentioned that before that October is a big month for the horse sales, and you mentioned earlier you were at Tattersalls at Newmarket for their yearling sales at the same time as Dancing in the Woods' race. So I know you came away with a new horse. Were you happy with that purchase?
I was absolutely thrilled to bits, genuinely, really pleased with this horse. Look, it was hard work as ever, the likes of you and me trying to buy horses. I tell you what, Phil, you wouldn't believe there's an economic crisis going on when you step inside Tattersalls and see the money that's being splashed around. The sales figures were yet again breaking records. So the big Tattersalls yearling sales is divided into 4 books, book 1, 2, 3 and 4, and they are literally books with pedigrees in. I don't bother going to book 1 and 2 because the horses are far too expensive and, it'd just be too frustrating. So I do go to book 3, and I've bought some nice horses, fortunately, over the years. But if I tell you that on the first day, so book 3, there were 2 days of sales. On the first day, 8 horses went for £100,000 or more. The previous record was 4. This is on the back of book 1, when a record £126 million plus was spent on, I think it was 424 yearlings at a record average of around £300,000 per horse. I'm sorry, the only word I can think of is ludicrous. Anyway, after looking at over 80 horses and being underbidder at 8 o'clock at night on Thursday night, which was a bit disappointing, I struck with a stunning-looking son of Group 1 winning Alwicare for just 15,000 guineas. Well-bred, good walker, plenty of scope, lovely temperament, vetted really well. And yes, he's going to be syndicated in 12 shares, and I've already had quite a bit of interest, which is great.
Brilliant. And I agree with you on the prices at the sales. In a lot of ways, it's a bit embarrassing that at the current sort of economic times, when people are suffering financial hardship, there does still seem to be a lot of people with enormous amounts of money to spend, and you do wonder whether it might be better being spent elsewhere. But that being said, I'm sure there's still many people who are cutting their spending levels, and maybe some of them will end up as syndicate members rather than taking on the expense of having a horse in training on their own.
Let's hope so, yes. Now, our tipping continues to do fairly well, surprisingly. We both fancied Alpinista to win the Arc de Triomphe, and she duly won. And it was great to see Sir Mark Prescott, Newmarket's currently longest-serving trainer, win the Arc de Triomphe. And he was there after an absence of 21 years. Apparently, the owner, Kirsten Rousing, insisted that he went to Paris, which I thought was lovely. It was also great for jockey Luke Morris. You know, he's used to trekking up and down the motorways, riding bread-and-butter races at tracks like Wolverhampton and Southwell. So to have a massive winner on the big stage was lovely for Luke.
Yeah, you mentioned where he's used to trekking off to, and in fact he was at Wolverhampton 24 hours after winning the Arc. I know that because he was riding one for Neil Mulholland, one of my trainers. So the Arc was one of those great stories that racing's got a tendency to provide. It was a real feel-good moment for so many reasons. And speaking of good news stories, I was delighted to see one of the senior members of the weighing room, Robert Havlin. He rode his first Group 1 winner of a long career this month. Great to see that. And the icing on the cake probably was that it was one of your horses to follow from last month's podcast. Commissioning provided him with that winner.
Yeah, it wasn't the kiss of death, so that was good to know. Look, another feel-good story to distract us from the political and economic chaos that we've had to endure of late. But enough of that. Nostrum, another horse I'd mentioned that I thought was a horse to follow, had his bubble slightly burst when a third in a Dewhurst, but he still ran okay.
Yeah, I thought he still looked quite inexperienced. I think there could be more to come from him next year, so wouldn't cross him out of the notebook just yet.
Champions Day, of course, was as ever full of drama. Sad to see the hitherto unbeaten Baid get stuck in the mud and lose his final race before going off to stud. But do you know what, Phil? I think that just goes to show how incredible Frankel's feat was to remain unbeaten in 14 races. Truly remarkable that. I thought trainer Willie Haggis, who trains Baid, very dignified afterwards. It meant he didn't win the trainer's title. But I think he was completely vindicated in not sending the horse to the Arc de Triomphe, where the ground was very soft. Look, I'd like to have seen Willie win the trainer's title, but it was not to be. Still on the Champions Day, obviously Frankie, he loves Ascot. He won 2 races on Kinross and Emily Upjohn. That was a great highlight for race fans. What about your highlights, Phil?
I love Champions Day, selfishly because I won loads of money with my bets that day. I backed Bayside Boy each way, as well as the Conqueror of Baid, Bay Bridge. I thought the latter was a good bet to place, but I didn't really expect him to win. So I was kind of left wishing I'd done the Bay double, because that would have been a bit of a spectacular payout.
You sound like Harry Enfield, loads of money. Anyway, it sounded like you had a good day. Excellent. Yeah, I had a few quid each way on Bay Bridge, a horse I've kept an eye on. But well done on backing Bayside Boyle. I think won at 33-1. Well done.
Yeah, he did,
Are there any horses you'd like to highlight for our listeners? Maybe jumpers?
Yeah, well, with a view to the jump season, one of those would be Run for Oscar. He won the big long-distance staying handicap, the Cesarovic at Newmarket, very easily indeed. If he can repeat that kind of form over hurdles this winter, he could be one to watch, that's for sure.
Well, I shall put him into my notebook. Run for Oscar. There you go. Now, moving away from the racecourse, the big October stories were probably the announcement that the Cheltenham Festival will surprisingly stay at 4 days and not be extended to 5, and also the reduction in the race programme. Thoughts, Phil, on the 4-day festival?
Yeah, bit of egg on my face on that one, I think. Listeners will remember us discussing that back when the idea of the 5-day festival was being discussed. And they'll realise that the news that we're staying at 4 days definitely came as a pretty big surprise to me. I thought it was inevitable that the financial windfall that a 5th day would produce wouldn't be ignored. And I must admit, I thought the consultation that took place was more for show, and it was really a done deal. But yeah, have to give credit where it's due. There were certainly far more people that felt that the 4-day festival was preferable to stepping up to 5, and it seems that the Jockey Club racecourses have acted on that feedback. So yeah, well done to them.
Yes, as you say, not many people saw that coming, and I'd like to echo your sentiment about the Jockey Club listening to feedback. Perhaps A.P. McCoy's very vocal opposition carried a lot of weight. Now, as to the reduction in races, well, I certainly welcomed that too.
Yeah, there's been plenty of negative news out there in the world at the moment, but racing's done quite a good job this month at announcing things that have generally been seen as positive in our little world. I saw Peter Saville interviewed on the Luck on Sunday TV show on Racing TV during the month, and he made some good points that he feels there's not necessarily too much racing, but there is definitely too many of certain race types, and the race reductions that have been announced seem to have taken that on board. The races that are being removed are typically those that have attracted very low numbers of entries in the last couple of years, and then they're adding some extra races where entries have been greater to try and give opportunities to the horses that need them. So it's a net reduction in racing, but it does seem quite targeted to avoid horses being left in the stables due to a lack of suitable opportunities. And yeah, that makes sense to me. As you know, I like a plan that's got a bit of reasoning behind it, and this one certainly seemed to have.
Indeed, indeed. That's you with your lawyer's hat on, Phil, isn't it? Now, talking of positive news, one very positive initiative this year has been the Great British Racing Ownership Days. You and I were both at Newbury and then Windsor, and we're going to be at the 7th and last event at Ascot on the 18th and 19th